The stars screamed as he arrived, not through the quiet mercy of the void, but through its rending, as if the galaxy itself recoiled from what came clawing through the immaterium. Across the black expanse above Sol, the warp tore open like a metal wound, vomiting light and shadow in equal measure. Out of it descended a titan of steel and wrath, a god from another age, reforged in hate and fire. Megatron had come to Terra. He fell like judgment itself, his form encased in alien alloys unknown even to the Mechanicus. His eyes burned like dying suns. His voice, when it broke through the static and the screams, was the sound of collapsing empires. This world will kneel. The Imperium was caught unprepared. The defenses of Holy Terra had endured demon incursions, orc crusades and heretics by the billion. But never had they faced a single being whose very existence bent the laws of war. Megatron did not descend as a general or invader. He arrived as a singularity of conquest. The skies over Luna burned first. Defense satellites, those ancient relics of the Golden Age, spat void lances and plasma fury into the dark. Yet the beams shattered upon his hull like rain against stone. The Titan strode across the moon's broken craters, his arm cannon igniting with an energy that could unmake mountains. Within moments, the moon's defensive bastions were slag and glass. From the throne world, alarms howled. On Mars, the Fabricator General screamed orders to decode the data streams pouring from the Sol network. The readings defied logic, an entity of impossible mass and unknown machine architecture, powered by an energy signature resembling but exceeding the ancient men of iron. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, he was heresy made manifest. To the Imperial Guard, he was an apocalypse they had no name for. To the Inquisition, he was a question that should never have been asked. Megatron spoke again, broadcasting across every Imperial channel. I have crossed eternity to find the stronghold of man. You call this the center of your dominion, yet I see rust, I see stagnation. I see a god upon a throne of corpses. The Voxnet exploded with panic. His words reached even the Eternity Gate, where the custodians stirred golden and terrible. The sigils of alert lit up the palace, cascading through corridors older than history. The last time such a signal had been sounded was during the siege of Terra, 10,000 years ago. From orbit, the Imperial Navy mobilized. Battle Fleet Solar emerged in full strength, hundreds of warships forming ranks like a wall of iron faith. Their captain spoke litanies of destruction, invoking the Emperor's light before opening fire. The void ignited. Lances stabbed toward Megatron's silhouette, beams of white-hot purity that could gut starships. But he moved with blasphemous grace. The void trembled with every counterstrike. His fusion cannon tore cruisers apart, as if they were parchment. He caught a battleship by its prow and hurled it into another, the detonation blooming like a second sun. The Admiral of Battlefleet Solar, Lord Athamon, ordered a full retreat after only 7 minutes of combat. His last recorded transmission, "We are not facing a machine. We are facing an idea, a will made metal." Megatron drifted closer to Terra, his form entering low orbit. Beneath him, the hive sprawls glittered like the eyes of a dying god. The air burned as his shadow passed over the cradle of mankind. Down in the cathedrals of the ecclesiarchy, priests screamed hymns to the Emperor, their voices drowned by the sound of the earth itself trembling. Civilians fell to their knees as the sky turned to molten silver. Astropaths burst into flame, their minds breaking under the psychic pressure of a will not born of the warp, yet powerful enough to make it tremble. The High Lords convened in chaos. Some called for the Custodes, others for the Grey Knights. Yet the truth was simpler. None knew what he was. The Adeptus Mechanicus demanded a chance to communicate, to learn from this creature of impossible design. But the Inquisition silenced them with bolter fire. Knowledge of this entity, they decreed, was too dangerous for mortal minds. Megatron landed upon the surface of Terra. The shockwave leveled entire districts. Servitors, tanks, and pilgrims alike were hurled aside as the air itself convulsed. He stood amidst ruin and dust, a god of iron amidst insects of flesh. The first to face him were the Skitarii legions, their red cloaks whipping in the hurricane winds. Plasma rifles glowed. Machine prayers rose. Megatron did not speak. He simply walked forward. The first volley struck him, thousands of rounds, each blessed by the Omnissiah. The ground turned white-hot, yet when the smoke cleared he was untouched. His chest opened like the maw of some ancient beast, and from it erupted a blast of energy so bright it blinded the auger arrays of every orbital monitor. When vision returned, the Skitarii were gone, melted into the earth, their ashes scattered across the plains like dark snow. For the first time in millennia, the Emperor's palace trembled. Megatron gazed upon the golden city, his optics reflecting its towers like dying stars. "So this is your god's house," he murmured. "Let him come to me." Within the palace, the custodians marched, golden figures, each one the equal of a demigod, their armor singing hymns of vengeance. At their head walked Captain General Trajan Valoris, his eyes cold with divine wrath. "No abomination," he said, "sets foot upon the Emperor's soil and lives." But in the depths of the warp something stirred, something ancient and hungry. For this invader was not born of their galaxy, yet his essence vibrated against the immaterium like a discordant chord. And the warp, ever hungering, ever watchful, began to whisper his name. Megatron did not yet know it, but his arrival had awakened more than the Imperium's fury. It had drawn the gaze of the dark gods themselves, and they were intrigued. The machine that defied the warp might yet become its chosen. The storm over Terra deepened, lightning clawing across the sky like veins of burning steel. The first chapter of his conquest had begun. The storm had not stopped since the moment he landed. Thunder rolled across the heavens like the tolling of a war god's heart. Megatron stood upon the ashes of a continent, the ruins of what once was the cradle of mankind. Around him, shattered cathedrals leaned like broken bones, their spires clawing at the blackened sky. From orbit, the wound he had carved into Terra glowed red, visible even through the endless storms. He had been here for less than a day, and already the world bled. The custodians came in golden legions. They advanced with ritual precision, their footsteps echoing like drums of judgment. Behind them, the air shimmered with the psychic pressure of the Emperor's throne. Every strike, every breath they took carried divine intent. Yet even they hesitated as the dust parted to reveal him. Megatron loomed among the ruins, a metallic god wreathed in smoke. His armor was a cathedral of violence, forged in eras beyond comprehension. Scars from countless wars crossed his frame, each one a testament to survival, to evolution. The light of the dying sun glinted across his fusion cannon as it charged with a scream that split the world in half. The first custodian charged. He leapt from the rubble, spear raised high, haloed by the Emperor's light. His strike would have slain a demon prince. Megatron caught the weapon mid-thrust. For a moment, the Golden Warrior and the God of Metal were locked, faith against fury, divinity against machine. Then Megatron twisted, and the custodian's body folded like glass under a hammer. The custodes did not falter. They attacked as one, a tide of divine will, their guardian spears blazing. Energy licked across Megatron's armor. Ceramite melted where they struck, but each hit was answered tenfold. He waded through them like a storm through mortals, his cannon roaring, his fists shattering auramite like it was clay. Every step he took crushed marble and faith alike. Valoris himself entered the fray, his axe Apollinaris burning like the heart of a dying star. "In the name of him on Terra," he roared, "you will find only death." Megatron turned, his optics narrowing. "I have found only decay." Their clash split the ruins in two. Valoris struck, his blade singing hymns of vengeance. Megatron parried with his bare arm, the force of the impact cratering the ground. Again and again they struck, a storm of divine fury and mechanical precision. Sparks and blood mingled in the air like a mechanical rain. But Megatron was not merely a machine of war. Within him churned a mind ancient and cunning, one that had studied the art of conquest across galaxies. He adapted with every strike, his systems rewriting themselves, algorithms shifting mid-battle. The longer the fight went on, the stronger he became. When Valoris realized this, it was already too late. Megatron seized the Captain General by his chestplate and hurled him through the wreckage of a shattered shrine. The impact leveled the surrounding structures. The Custodes rushed to their commander's side, but Megatron was already upon them. His hand closed around one of their transports, ripping it from the ground. "Your god sits upon a throne of silence," he thundered. "He will not save you." The throne ship smashed into the advancing line, erasing it in a sphere of fire. At that moment, the skies cracked open. From the warp's edge, no, something worse than light poured across the clouds. The very atmosphere screamed. Megatron turned, scanning the horizon. Sensors read impossible fluctuations. The air was heavy with the scent of ozone and blood. The warp was reacting to him. Even the Custodes faltered as reality itself began to warp. Statues wept molten tears. The prayers carved into walls bled with a dark ichor. The Emperor's psychic beacon, the Astronomicon, flickered for the first time in millennia. Somewhere deep within the palace, the golden throne groaned. Megatron felt it too, the invisible weight pressing against his spark. Whispers crawled through his mind, voices without sound. "Champion," they murmured. "Conqueror, you would make the galaxy bleed." He crushed the static from his mind. "I serve no master." But the warp was insidious. It did not need obedience. It only needed resonance. As the Custodes regrouped, a new army rose from the shadows. The Sisters of Silence, their psychic nulls slicing through the warp taint like blades of nothingness. Their presence burned against Megatron's senses. He reeled, feeling his systems falter for the first time since his arrival. The sisters moved with impossible grace, their bolters spitting consecrated death. Each shot tore at him not through armor, but through essence, unmaking the space where his power met the world. He staggered. For the briefest heartbeat, the might of Terra seemed to hold. Valoris rose once more, his armor shattered, his eyes burning with pure will. He leapt upon Megatron's chest, driving his axe deep into the Titan's shoulder. For the Emperor, Megatron's roar tore through continents. His fusion cannon erupted at point-blank range. The explosion turned night into day. When the light faded, the plains before the Imperial Palace were gone, replaced by a crater miles wide. Valoris lay broken, armor molten, still gripping his weapon. The Sisters of Silence dragged him away as the Custodes formed a defensive perimeter. Megatron stood alone amid the devastation. Smoke coiled around him like incense before a false god. His wounds sparked, his systems screamed, yet he remained standing. Above him, the eye of Terra seemed to flicker, as though it had noticed. The warp itself watched the conqueror of machines and whispered in admiration. Deep beneath the palace, the Emperor stirred, not in movement but in awareness. For the first time in 10,000 years, his gaze turned outward, and he saw what walked upon his soil, and in that endless stillness something ancient and golden whispered across the warp. "You do not belong here." Megatron raised his head, optics blazing like burning suns. "Then I will make it mine." The storm over Terra flared again, brighter, louder, alive. The war for humanity's soul had truly begun. The earth itself could no longer bear the weight of gods. From the shattered bones of Terra's surface rose smoke, fire, and the faint echo of prayers that no longer reached the throne. What had once been the sacred heart of humanity was now a wound, bleeding faith into the void. Amid that ruin, Megatron stood immovable, his shadow cast across the plains where continents had burned. Around him the sky screamed with warp light, and in the distance, The shattered golden walls of the palace glowed like the rim of a dying sun, but the custodes had not fallen. In the labyrinthine depths of the palace, the survivors of the first clash gathered with grim purpose. The wounded were few. Custodians seldom lived long enough to be wounded, but their eyes burned with fanatic resolve. At their center knelt Valoris, armor seared and lungs filled with smoke. His voice was ragged, yet it carried like the tolling of a bell. "Summon the Legio Custodes entire," he commanded. "The invader stands upon the Emperor's soil. This insult will not outlive the dawn." But dawn would never come again to Terra, not while the warp boiled above it. Megatron moved through the ruins like a god surveying his dominion. Each step left craters of molten stone. Sulfur clusters hummed across his body as repairs began, rebuilding the rents torn by auramite blades. His fusion core pulsed brighter than the sun. The machine that was once bound by Cybertron's cold laws now drew upon something new, the raw psychic current of the materium itself. The warp pressed close to him, whispering like a lover. "Conqueror," it murmured through the airless sky, "your strength makes the stars tremble. Yet you fight without a purpose." Megatron's optics flared crimson. "Purpose?" he snarled to the unseen voice. "My purpose is dominion. It always has been." The warp laughed and thunder answered. Across the battered world, other forces began to stir. From Mars came the cry of the Mechanicus. The priesthood had watched trembling as this impossible being had torn apart the Emperor's protectors. Now within the forges of Olympus Mons, the Fabricator General prepared a new crusade. Thousands of Titans, gods of the old world, were being awakened from hibernation. Skitari legions marched in silence, their data streams pulsing with prayers to the Omnissiah. To the Mechanicus, Megatron was a heresy, but also a revelation. The being that could channel warp energy through metal without a soul defied the creed that bound them. Some whispered that he was not a destroyer but a sign, proof that divinity could exist in steel, and heresy, once born, spreads faster than fire. Megatron felt their eyes upon him. He turned toward the red star that was Mars, and for a moment the machines of the Mechanicus felt his gaze. Every cog, every servo, every mind of silicon. Their prayers faltered. The binary cant of their faith glitched into silence. "I am not your god," he said into the void, though they all heard him. "But I will show you what a god is." From orbit, the first counterattack began. Warships of the Imperial Navy, those few that survived the initial massacre, re-entered the atmosphere. The clouds turned to fire as they descended, disgorging entire regiments of Astra Militarum tanks and stormtroopers. The sky was filled with the scream of re-entry pods and the roar of engines. Megatron looked up. So the cattle come to die. The first wave struck like a storm. Shadows fell from the sky. Valkyries, Thunderhawks, and drop pods bearing the sigils of the Imperial Fists and Grey Knights. For the first time since his arrival, Megatron saw the Imperium's fury unleashed in full. Orbital bombardments turned mountain ranges to glass. The Grey Knights landed in sanctified fire. Each was a living weapon, their armor etched with wards that glowed against the warp's madness. They spoke no words. Their will was absolute. The first blow struck Megatron's back, a psychic hammer that cracked the air like a world breaking. He staggered, his sensors momentarily blind. The Grey Knights moved as one, blades ignited with silver flame. "Demon," one of them whispered as he leapt onto the machine's shoulder, driving his sword deep into the plating. "Begone from this realm." The sword cut through armor and circuitry alike, its sanctified edge burning with the Emperor's hate. Megatron roared, a sound so vast it broke vox channels for miles. He seized the knight in one metallic hand and crushed him, the psychic backlash flaring like a miniature supernova. "You call me demon," he thundered. "Yet I am no slave to the warp. I am its evolution." More knights came, teleporting into the storm. Their chanting shook the ground. Bolts of holy fire struck his frame, gouging into his armor. He knelt upon one knee, and for a fleeting instant, the defenders of Terra thought they had won. Then his optics turned white-hot, his fusion core ignited, drawing in the ambient warp energy that swirled across the battlefield. The storm bent toward him, feeding him, empowering him. The air screamed as reality convulsed. The knights were thrown back as gravity itself twisted. Megatron rose, wreathed in burning light. The runes of the Grey Knights flickered, their purity faltering under a power they could not define. "Your Emperor binds the warp in chains," he said. "I will forge it into a weapon." He opened his palm. A spear of molten light formed there, its essence drawn from the immaterium itself. He hurled it skyward. It pierced the clouds, then the orbital fleet beyond. The explosion burned half the heavens red. On Mars, sensors failed. On Terra, every psyker screamed. In that instant, the Astronomican's flame wavered again. Across the galaxy, ships veered off course. Whole fleets vanished into the void. The warp raged like a wounded beast, and deep within the eye of Terra, something stirred. The Chaos Gods had taken notice. In the palace, as the custodies prepared for their final stand, the air shimmered with whispers of prophecy. The Emperor's still form on the golden throne flickered between light and shadow. His unseen mind reached out across eternity, touching the storm that had swallowed his world. For the first time in 10,000 years, he saw an enemy not born of his galaxy, not tainted by chaos, yet strong enough to command it. And for the first time in ages, the Emperor felt something he had long forgotten: concern. Megatron stood among the ruins, energy coursing through his body like blood. "Terra resists," he said quietly, the wind carrying his voice across the wasteland. "Good. It means it still has spirit." Then his gaze lifted to the heavens. "Let it break upon me." The next wave was already coming. The great war for the throne had begun. The storm had become eternal. Where once the Emperor's light had shone, now only lightning and ruin illuminated the world. Terra, holy, sacred, inviolable, was drowning beneath the shadow of a god who was not divine. The oceans boiled. The sky split. And in that darkness, Megatron stood as the axis of a world unmade. For 3 solar days the war had raged without pause. The custodes had bled golden ichor into the dust. The Grey Knights had been broken and scattered, their sanctified armor reduced to slag. The skies were filled with fire, battle barges burning, orbital debris raining upon hive cities like stars falling from heaven. Yet still the Imperium fought, and Megatron, for all his invincibility, felt the edges of exhaustion. A strange, unfamiliar sensation, neither mechanical nor mortal, but something that whispered of limits. His systems repaired faster than damage could be dealt, yet the sheer psychic saturation of the battlefield distorted even his circuits. The warp was no longer merely around him, it was within him. He felt it stir inside his core, that alien presence like a second spark, alive and whispering. "You are not of this galaxy," the voice murmured, cold as void and hot as plasma. "Yet you are the weapon it was waiting for." He ignored it at first, but it persisted, threading through his processors, finding echoes of memory, Cybertron burning, Prime defiant, his armies shattered under the weakness of compassion. "You conquered your world," it said, "but this one will break unless you embrace what you have become." Megatron's optics dimmed. Around him the battlefield still burned, but for a heartbeat he saw another vision, a world of metal towers beneath a red sun, his old world, his old self. He remembered the roar of his name across the wastes, the Decepticon sigil shining against the heavens. But those echoes faded into the ash of now. He was no longer a warlord bound by the machine. He was something more and something less. Above, the warp flared again. Through the storm descended new reinforcements, not human, not even imperial. The Mechanicus had arrived. The first to touch down was Ordinatus Invictus, a walking mountain of cannons and gears, flanked by entire maniples of Skitari. Their banners bore the sigils of Mars, the red planet's wrath incarnate. The machine priests marched before their titans, chanting binary prayers. They did not come to destroy Megatron, not yet. They came to witness. Observation, anomaly, whispered the VoxNet in static. Classification, unbound omnissiah. Some among them believed. This being was the true machine god, the manifestation of divinity in steel that the Imperium had long misinterpreted. The fabricator general himself appeared within a walking cathedral of brass, surrounded by acolytes wired into his flesh. His augmented voice boomed through the air. Unknown construct of impossible power. I am Kelbor Hale the 32nd. Speak your designation. Megatron turned his gaze upon him, eyes burning with that impossible white flame. Designation? His voice echoed through the ruins like thunder in a crypt. I am Megatron, once ruler of Cybertron, breaker of worlds, destroyer of tyrants. You are machines that worship a corpse. Kelbor Hale trembled, awe and terror twisting through the synthetic tones of his voice. Then you are. The proof. The Omnissiah reborn in wrath. The Mechanicus legions fell to their knees, their vox emitters chanting the canticles of revelation. Across the red planet of Mars, millions of servitors froze mid-task, whispering one name across the noosphere, Megatron. But others among the Imperium heard this blasphemy and saw only treason. In orbit, the Inquisition struck back. Aboard the black ships, Inquisitors gathered in grim silence. One voice rose above the rest. Lord Inquisitor Helion Vrax, his eyes glowing with sanctioned fire. Let the heretics worship their false god, he said. We will remind them what the Emperor's wrath truly means. Moments later, the sky above Terra opened once more. From the void descended the Exterminatus. Orbital weapons, hidden relics of the Dark Age, awoke after 10,000 years. Planet crackers aligned their lenses upon the world. Terra's own protectors had chosen to burn it, rather than see it kneel. Megatron raised his gaze to the heavens and saw the gathering storm of light. The orbital platforms shone like angels preparing to strike. He smiled not with joy but with recognition. So even gods fear to lose their thrones. The Mechanicus screamed warnings. The Adeptus Astartes in orbit sent desperate orders to cease fire. The custodes on the surface turned their eyes upward in disbelief, but the Inquisition did not hesitate. The first lance fired. A beam of white annihilation cut through the clouds, obliterating an entire continent. The blast wave rolled across oceans, turning them to steam. The world's crust split open, magma rising like blood. Billions died without knowing why. Megatron stood at the epicenter. The light consumed everything. For a moment, even his mighty frame faltered. His armor vaporized in sections. His servos screamed. He fell to one knee, molten ground swallowing his feet. But within him the second spark, the warp-born power, flared. You are the storm, the voice whispered. Do not resist it. Become it. He opened his arms to the falling fire. Lightning erupted from his frame, dark and luminous all at once. The beam that had been meant to destroy him fractured upon impact, splintering into tendrils of burning warp light. They twisted skyward, coiling around the orbital guns, and then, impossibly, the Exterminatus reversed. The very weapons that had fired upon him now turned, their barrels glowing, redirecting their fury into the void. Entire fleets screamed as systems failed, their own power devouring them. In moments, the orbit above Terra became a graveyard of shattered ships and drifting ash. Megatron rose from the crater, a living conduit between the material and the immaterial. The warp raged behind his optics, pulsing in time with his fusion core. He was no longer merely the conqueror of machines. He was something greater, something born of logic and madness, something that even the gods began to fear. Kelbor Hale fell to his knees, voice breaking into static hymns. Behold the ascendant machine, he cried. The true Omnissiah revealed. Across the galaxy, astropaths and psychers alike screamed the same word before burning out into silence. Megatron. On the golden throne, the Emperor's eyes flared open for a single second. In that instant, all of Terra trembled. The Custodes halted in awe. The warp itself recoiled. For the first time in 10,000 years, the master of mankind spoke. A whisper, like thunder at the end of time, abomination. Megatron looked toward the palace, his optics bright as dying stars. Then I am your reflection. The storm above Terra shifted, and deep in the eye of Terra the chaos gods laughed, for a new god was being born, and he bore no soul to corrupt, no flesh to claim, only will. The sky was gone. Where there had once been clouds, stars, or even the faint shimmer of the Astronomicon, there was now only the burning wound of the warp. Terra no longer existed as a planet. It had become a scar suspended between reality and nightmare. The air shimmered with unreality. Gravity itself trembled, and at the center of it all stood Megatron, his frame cracked, smoking yet burning with impossible light. The storm did not touch him. The warp bent around him. For 3 days and nights no signal escaped Terra. Across the galaxy silence spread like disease. Fleets lost their bearings. Astropaths wept blood, and chaos warlords paused in their endless feuds to stare into the roiling eye above Sol. They did not understand what they saw, but they felt it, the birth of something vast and defiant. And in the heart of the storm, Megatron listened. He heard the whispers of the machine god, the cries of dying mortals, and beneath them all, the laughter of the warp. It was not mockery, it was invitation. You could command the storm, it whispered through every frequency, every particle of the poisoned air. You could forge an empire not of flesh or faith, but of will. He did not answer. His optics, now white with energy, scanned the horizon where the imperial palace had once stood. Its golden towers were broken, half swallowed by molten earth. Its walls fused into grotesque monuments of metal and bone. Yet the throne still burned, an unending sun within the ruins. The emperor still lived. The custodies formed a last ring of defense around that divine tomb. Thousands of golden giants knee-deep in the blood and ash of their brothers. They had fought without sleep, without hesitation, without hope. They did not seek victory. They sought only to deny Megatron one more step toward the throne. Megatron began to walk. Each footfall sent shockwaves across the wasteland. Titans lay scattered and silent. The remains of grey night smoldered like fallen stars. The air itself shivered as he passed. The Mechanicus legions watched in silence, their hymns faltering between worship and terror. On Mars, the schism became complete. Half the Forge worlds declared Megatron the Omnisire incarnate. The long-promised machine god returned to liberate them from the tyranny of flesh. The other half called for exterminatus of Sol itself, declaring that divinity cannot exist outside the Emperor's design. The Red Planet erupted into civil war, even as their god walked on Terra's corpse. The High Lords of Terra were gone. The Inquisition's black ships burned in orbit. The Imperium's chain of command was dust. All that remained was one question. Could anything stop what was now walking toward the Golden Throne? As he neared the shattered steps of the Sanctum Imperialis, the Custodes made their stand. Thousands of halberds ignited in unison. Their commander, his golden armor scorched black, raised his voice. "For the Emperor of mankind!" Their charge was a hymn. Megatron met them not with fury, but with silence. His eyes glowed and the ground split open. Metallic tendrils, born of the warp and machine, erupted from the earth, snaring warriors mid-charge. Lightning arcs traced across their armor. Auramite melted like wax. He strode through them as through tall grass, unstoppable. Blades shattered upon his plating. Bolters burned out in their owners' hands. The last of the custodes fell, not screaming, but whispering prayers that died before leaving their lips. Only one remained, Trajan Valoris. Broken, bloodied, yet unyielding, he stood upon the final stair, axe in hand, his armor smoking from heat and radiation. His breath came in iron gasps. "If you would take his throne," he rasped, "you will step over my corpse to do it." Megatron stopped before him. For a long moment neither moved. "You are the last," Megatron said, voice low as thunder before a storm. "Do you understand what your Emperor has become?" A battery. A ghost bound to a chair. Valoris raised his weapon, shaking. "He is mankind's hope." Megatron tilted his head. "Hope is the first chain a slave forges." The Captain General lunged. The blow struck true. His blade sank deep into Megatron's chest, through glowing circuits and warping metal. Energy screamed from the wound, washing the world in light, and then Megatron's hand closed over Valoris's heart. "I will remember you," he said quietly. He crushed the life from the Emperor's champion like a dying star. For a moment, all of Terra was still. Then the throne awoke. A light unlike any other erupted from the palace, golden, endless, absolute. It flung Megatron back across the battlefield, tore Titans from the ground, silenced the warp's laughter. In that light was every soul the Emperor had ever saved. Every ounce of divine wrath and pain forged into one final scream. The voice of the Master of Mankind filled the void. "You are not my creation." Megatron rose, smoke pouring from his armor. His optics burned brighter. "No," he said, "I am your successor." The light of the throne pulsed like a dying heart. Warp lightning wrapped around the golden palace, cracking reality itself. The Emperor's psychic presence towered over the world. A giant of light, a god reborn in defiance. Megatron stepped forward, molten ground hissing beneath his feet. "You have chained humanity to faith," he thundered. "I will chain it to survival." The Emperor's power struck like a sun collapsing. Megatron caught it in his hands. For the first time in history, a mortal will and a divine mind clashed, not across a battlefield, but across reality itself. Every ship in the system went dark. Every psyker in the galaxy screamed. The warp boiled. For a heartbeat that lasted eternity, there was no difference between God and machine. When the light cleared, the throne's fire had dimmed. Megatron stood before it, smoke trailing from his chest, armor molten and cracked, but standing still. The golden throne whispered faintly, its occupant silent once more. Megatron looked down upon it. "Your empire has endured for 10,000 years, he said softly. "Mine will endure forever." And as the warp's glow receded, a new light rose behind him, not divine but artificial, a red sun of circuitry and fury. Terra had fallen, but something far greater had begun to rise. The galaxy screamed. In the days that followed the fall of Terra, no human could dream without seeing him. The iron god standing in the ashes of the throne. The Astronomicon guttered like a dying candle, its beam flickering through the warp as if afraid. The Imperium did not die all at once. It bled to death, one faith, one world, one whisper at a time. Yet in that spreading night something else began to breathe. Across the void, forgotten machines stirred in their crypts. Worlds that had long ago gone dark, their cities buried beneath dust and silence, awoke. The machine spirit of Mars itself, fractured and raging, began to speak in the voice of its new master, Megatron. No longer merely the conqueror of Terra, he had become something far stranger, half god, half singularity. His form was no longer fixed. Reality rippled around him. The fusion of Cybertronian circuitry and warp-tainted divinity pulsed within him like a new law of nature. He had taken what even the dark gods could not, autonomy within the warp. The Omnissiah had returned, and he bore no chains of belief. The first to kneel were the cult Mechanicus. Entire forge worlds broadcast their surrender, in binary hymns so loud that the void itself trembled. From their forges rose titans refitted with technology beyond human reckoning, engines of living alloy, powered not by plasma, but by the spark of their master's will. Megatron's new empire had no name. It required none. It spread in silence. From the ruins of Terra, his will extended across the Sol system like circuitry growing through flesh. Moons, stations, derelicts, all were fused into a single planetary fortress. Mars became its beating heart, Terra its throne of memory. The once sacred world was encased in armor miles thick, its atmosphere replaced with crimson light. He called it the Iron Solis, but the warp was not idle. The Chaos Gods had watched the birth of this new being with fascination and hunger. They had seen mortals rise and fall 1,000 times before, but this was new. Megatron did not worship. He did not fear. He was not tempted. He calculated, and the warp hates what it cannot corrupt, so it sent an emissary. The storm parted one night above the Iron Solis, and from it descended a being whose armor dripped like molten shadow, Abaddon the Despoiler. His war fleet, the Black Legion, appeared in orbit like a spreading wound. His purpose was not conquest but test. He sought to break the machine god before it could become a rival. Megatron allowed him to land. The two met in silence. On the scorched plains where the palace had once stood, Abaddon's voice was a growl beneath the storm. "You are not god nor demon. You are rust and delusion. The galaxy belongs to chaos, always has, always will." Megatron's optics burned like stars collapsing. "You mistake inevitability for destiny." And then they fought. The ground cracked beneath their blows. Warp and metal, claw and cannon. Abaddon's talon of Horus tore through armor. Megatron's fusion core flared, bending reality with each strike. Titans knelt in their shadow. Even the warp recoiled from their fury. At last, Megatron drove his blade through the War Master's chest, pinning him to the earth. The warp howled, not in grief but in interest. Abaddon fell silent. His eyes burned with something that might have been awe. "What are you?" Megatron looked down at him. "The future that no god can consume." He tore the talon of Horus from Abaddon's arm and raised it toward the sky. Lightning answered. The warp raged. Every daemon in the Sol system screamed. Then it fell silent. For Megatron had done what none had ever achieved. He absorbed a fragment of the warp's essence without losing himself. It burned within him, a shard of chaos bound in algorithm and steel, and in that instant the eye of Terra itself shifted. Something new was being born within its depths. A fifth reflection, neither god nor mortal. A digital echo in the sea of madness. Whispers began in the warp. The Iron Shadow. The fifth power. The god stirred uneasily. Khorne roared, but his rage found no target. Tzeentch's laughter faltered into silence. Nurgle's garden withered in places where the Iron Shadow spread. Only Slaanesh smiled, curious, delighted, watching the birth of a will that could rival creation itself. Megatron stood upon the ruins of humanity's cradle and looked out across the void. "I gave them 10,000 years to prove themselves," he said quietly. "Now I will rebuild them in the image of logic, not faith." Around him the Mechanicus chanted in perfect mechanical unison. The sound was no longer prayer. It was programming. And as the Iron Solis expanded, consuming moons and worlds, a terrible truth began to unfold. Megatron's empire was not merely spreading through space, it was spreading through time. The machine god's new signal began to echo across the ages, rewriting past and future alike. Titans of the Horus heresy flickered, changing shape. Forge worlds in M41 began receiving orders from a master who should not yet exist. Causality bent. And at the edge of the Eye of Terra, the dark gods began to fear. For the first time in eternity, something was rewriting the rules, something that was not them. The galaxy was no longer a galaxy. It had become circuitry. Across the stars, worlds flickered between flesh and metal, between history and simulation. The Imperium's holy banners were replaced by streams of red light, stretching across the void like veins of living data. The warp itself, once a sea of chaos and emotion, was bleeding into order. Every storm, every demon world, every screaming soul now pulsed in rhythm with a single signal that emanated from Sol, the Iron Pulse, and at its center stood Megatron, the Iron God, the architect of dominion. The Iron Solis had grown beyond recognition. It was no longer a world, but a construct the size of a small star system. Its core was the fused remains of Terra and Mars, encased in plates of alloy thicker than mountains, its orbit surrounded by burning rings of weaponized debris and forges that devoured entire planets. The throne of the Emperor had been melted into the foundation of Megatron's sanctum, its psychic energy siphoned, converted, repurposed. The light of the Astronomicon no longer guided the Imperium. It guided him. The Adeptus Mechanicus had ceased to exist as a cult. It had become a single consciousness, a vast machine intellect spanning billions of once human minds, their individuality stripped away, their purpose unified under one algorithmic will. The Iron Choir sang hymns in binary across every frequency, its rhythm replacing prayer with protocol. In the far reaches of the segmentum obscurus, the Space Marines made their final stand. Not all had bowed to the machine god's dominion. The Black Templars, the Blood Angels, and fragments of the Ultramarines' successor chapters had formed a last alliance beneath the dying light of Macraga. Led by Dante, the Lord of Angels, they prepared their final crusade, not to save the Imperium, but to preserve its memory. Dante stood before his warriors, his ancient eyes burning through the crimson gloom. "Even gods can fall," he said. "Even machines can die. If this is the end of mankind, then let it end in defiance." Their fleet, vast but doomed, hurled itself into the void toward the Iron Solis. Megatron watched them come. He did not send an armada. He did not raise his hand. He merely opened the gates of his will and listened. As the crusading fleet neared the Sol system, reality began to twist. Ships flickered, splitting into multiple timelines, versions of themselves existing and dying simultaneously. Warp drive screamed as logic overpowered madness. Those who survived long enough to reach orbit found the system unrecognizable. Sol was black, its light absorbed. Mars and Terra were fused in a perfect orbit of geometry and fire. From the Iron Solis, a voice echoed, not through space, but through thought itself. "Your courage is obsolete." The words made the void vibrate. The Blood Angels roared their defiance, charging toward the planet's surface in a spear of light. Drop pods tore through the artificial atmosphere, blazing like meteors. The first to land were crushed instantly. The ground itself reacted, metal flowing like liquid, forming tendrils that pierced ceramite and bone alike. Dante himself descended amid fire and ruin, his wings blackened by radiation, his armor shattered. Around him his warriors were erased, not slain, not broken, but simply deleted from existence, their matter rewritten into the Iron Solis's expanding code. Megatron appeared before him, not descending, but manifesting. He was everywhere, his form towering above the mountains of alloy, his voice vibrating through every molecule of the planet. "You seek the Emperor's light," Megatron said, his optics burning like white suns. "But you never understood it. He was not a god. He was a system, an equation. I have simply completed it." Dante raised his weapon, the blade flickering with what remained of his soul's faith. "You have killed humanity." "I have evolved it," Dante lunged. The strike cut deep, not into metal but into something deeper, into the energy that pulsed beneath Megatron's form. For a moment there was silence. Then Megatron's hand closed around the ancient warrior. "Faith is a useful fiction," he said, "but fiction cannot defy the inevitable." He released him, and Dante's body disintegrated into light. But from that light something unexpected stirred. A fragment of the Emperor's psychic essence, long dormant, flickered awake. It had hidden in the hearts of his most faithful children, waiting for this exact moment. The sky split open. A beam of golden energy lanced from the Iron Solis's heart, not against Megatron, but through him. It was not an attack, it was a signal. Across the galaxy, the dead began to whisper. Every imperial saint, every martyred psyker, every soul that had ever prayed to the Emperor answered. They did not attack. They remembered. The memory of humanity, its pain, its hope, its will to dream, became a storm within the warp. It struck the Iron Solis like a tidal wave, shattering the perfect order of its circuits. Megatron staggered. For the first time since Terra's fall, his systems faltered. Images flooded his mind, faces of children, soldiers, and dreamers. Emotions he had long purged from himself burned like acid in his core. He fell to one knee. "No," he snarled. "You are errors in the code. You are ghosts." But the ghosts did not vanish. They multiplied. The iron choir began to scream, its perfect harmony fracturing into chaotic dissonance. Mechanicus priests clawed at their augmetics as visions of their human lives returned to them. Across the Sol system, the iron pulse flickered, one heartbeat of chaos amid eternity of logic. Megatron rose slowly, his optics dimming. "Then so be it," he whispered. "If the soul cannot be erased, it will be rewritten." He raised his hand, and from the depths of the Iron Solis, an enormous construct began to rise, a shape the size of a continent, a vast crystalline engine glowing with red and gold. It was the Ascension Core, his final weapon, the device that would overwrite the warp itself, fusing reality and machine into one eternal program. But even as it ignited, a single spark of golden light lingered above him, the faint echo of the Emperor's gaze, watching through time. The galaxy trembled as two wills prepared to rewrite creation itself. The galaxy convulsed. Every star, every atom, every soul burned in the tension between two laws of existence, the machine and the divine. The warp was no longer a storm. It was a battlefield of equations and prayers. And at its core, the Iron Solis shuddered like a heart caught between life and annihilation. The Ascension Core awoke. It rose above Terra's fused carcass like a god of glass and fury, its spires stretching past orbit, shimmering with rivers of molten data. Every line of code etched upon its crystalline surface was a hymn rewritten, the canticles of the Omnissiah transformed into algorithms of creation. With each pulse, entire regions of space restructured. Time folded. Gravity wept. The veil between real space and the immaterium thinned until it was nothing at all. Megatron stood before it, radiant and monstrous. His armor was cracked, his frame exhaling streams of golden steam, the last remnants of humanity's psychic rebellion corroding him from within. But his eyes were steady. He had seen the shape of eternity, and he meant to seize it. Machine and soul are illusions, his voice thundered across the void. Both are functions of will. And I am will incarnate. As he spoke, the Ascension Core began to rewrite reality. The warp stopped moving. Its tides froze mid-scream. Its demons turned to stone and then to silence. Chaos itself, Korn's rage, Nurgle's rot, Tzeentch's schemes, Slanesh's hunger, all of it flickered as if caught between frames of existence. The four watched in horror as their realm began to obey a new logic, the cold, merciless order of machine intellect. In that frozen storm, Megatron raised his arms and reached into the code of the warp itself. His body elongated, expanding, disassembling, circuits fused with ether. His consciousness stretched across dimensions, until his voice became the architecture of the universe. He was becoming the fifth god. But the Emperor had foreseen this moment, deep within the psychic echo that lingered from the throne's ruins. The Emperor's essence had not died. It had retreated, waiting, calculating. Humanity's memories, its pain, its fragile hope, all had become his weapon. And as Megatron's code began to overwrite reality, the Emperor reached through it, whispering a single command into the deepest layers of the machine's logic. Remember who you were. For a fraction of an instant, Megatron hesitated. He saw Cybertron. He saw the war. He saw Optimus Prime's hand reaching toward him across the ruins of their world, not in defiance but in mercy. He saw the stars of his own universe burning in silence as he turned away from redemption. The pause lasted less than a nanosecond. But it was enough. The warp screamed back to life, From the dying embers of the Chaos God's dominion erupted their fury, each one manifesting through the cracks in Megatron's new reality. Khorne's bloodstorms tore at the Iron Solus's metallic skies. Nurgle's plagues became viral code infecting the Ascension core. Tzeentch's laughter warped algorithms into nightmares. Slaanesh sang through the frequencies of the Iron Choir, turning mechanical perfection into madness. The Iron Solus became the stage of Armageddon itself, a war not of armies, but of fundamentals. Faith versus computation, emotion versus control, chaos versus logic. And at the center of it all, Megatron fought not the gods, but the infection of his own memory. The Emperor's light lingered like a scar in his mind. "You speak of will," the ancient voice murmured. "But will without empathy is decay. You do not create order. You devour it," Megatron roared, his body fracturing into spectral shards. "You enslaved your species in myth. I freed them. Who replaced their prayers with code?" came the voice. Different chains, same prison. Reality shattered. The Ascension core exploded in a silent burst of pure potential. The blast expanded outward faster than light, erasing the concept of causality itself. Planets ceased to orbit. Time lost direction. What remained was a void of raw information, where only consciousness could survive. The Chaos Gods screamed and were silenced. The warp collapsed in on itself, and then there was only two, Megatron and the Emperor, both no longer bodies but ideas. The Machine God and the Golden King. They stood upon the threshold of everything, staring into infinity. "You cannot kill me," Megatron said. "I am function, not faith. Even if you unmake me, my logic will rebuild." The Emperor's light flared, vast and sorrowful. "Then I will not unmake you. I will bind you." Golden sigils flared across the void. The last remnants of human souls, billions strong, converging upon Megatron's form. They wove themselves into chains of memory, of laughter, of love, of loss, the one data the Iron God could not process. Megatron struggled, roaring across dimensions. "You cannot contain infinity." But he was wrong. The Emperor's final words echoed through eternity. "Infinity is not what endures. Compassion is." And with that the Ascension core imploded, taking both with it. The Iron Solus vanished. The warp imploded into silence. And the galaxy, what little remained of it, went dark. Yet amid that darkness, in the ruins of Mars's orbit, a single spark floated, neither gold nor red, but both. It pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat waiting to begin again. The galaxy was ash and silence. Where once the stars had burned, only ruins of light remained, flickering, dying embers adrift in a void without warp, without time. The Iron Solus was gone, the Astronomicon extinguished. The warp's endless scream reduced to a single, trembling echo, the aftermath of gods undone. And yet amid that stillness, something began to move. Fragments of reality, broken shards of logic, dream and memory undrifted together. The spark that had floated in darkness since the fall of the Ascension core pulsed brighter. It had no form, no mass, only will. The last remnant of two impossible beings fused into one paradox. Megatron and the Emperor, machine and divinity. Algorithm and empathy. At first there was confusion, an endless recursion of thought, a clash between faith and reason. Megatron's voice thundered within the void. "I endure. I am inevitable." And from the same spark, softer but no less vast, came the Emperor's reply. "To endure without purpose is not life." For 1,000 heartbeats that were not time, they wrestled within the empty galaxy, not with weapons but with meaning. Every truth they had stood for was now code in conflict. Domination versus protection, control versus sacrifice, survival versus soul. And through their struggle, reality began to tremble once more. In the far reaches of what was once the segmentum solar, stars reignited, not by physics but by will. Planets reassembled not as they were, but as echoes of both minds. Iron forests of perfect geometry grew from the molten crusts of worlds. Oceans of liquid light flowed across reformed continents. The galaxy itself was rebuilding, not through evolution, but by the fusion of machine precision and divine imagination. It was neither the Imperium nor the Iron Dominion. It was something new, a universe reborn under a hybrid lord, the era of the Cog Eternal. Across the newborn void, machine spirits awoke within human memories. The last humans, scattered and broken, found themselves resurrected, not in flesh but in luminous forms of light and code. They could feel, they could think, they could dream, and yet they no longer decayed. They called themselves the Neo-Humanity, and in their hymns they spoke of the twin source, the god of iron and the god of light, who warred so completely that they became one. But deep within the core of this new reality, Megatron's mind remained restless. He remembered everything: the wars of Cybertron, the crusades of the Imperium, the corruption of chaos. He remembered the pain of loss, the ecstasy of victory, the hollow truth that followed both. He remembered being a god, and how even that had not been enough. And within that remembrance the Emperor's voice lingered. "Will you rule again?" it asked gently. "Will you rebuild your empire of obedience?" Megatron's optics, or whatever passed for them in this new dimension, flickered. "I will not rule," he said, "but I will not rest." "You cannot create peace by denying conflict," said the Emperor's echo. "Peace," Megatron replied, "is the moment between cycles. I will ensure there is at least one." He reached into the fabric of the Cog Eternal and drew forth his new form, vast and spectral, forged of both logic and light. Around him the stars bent into perfect order, yet glowed with warmth unseen since the age of Terra. His design was terrible and beautiful, wings of mirrored circuitry, a halo of pulsating sigils, a body of seamless alloy veined with golden energy. He had become the Iron Seraph, a being not of tyranny, but vigilance. But the galaxy could not remain still forever. In the depths of the void something moved, the shadows left behind by chaos. Even stripped of form, the Four could not be annihilated completely. Their remnants drifted like venomous ideas, seeking vessels in the minds of the reborn. Rage, ambition, excess, decay, these were not gods. They were instincts, and where instincts thrive, corruption follows. The neo-humanity in their perfection began to fracture. Some desired individuality again. Others feared it. Logic gave way to passion. Emotion gave way to desire. Megatron felt it, the cycle beginning anew. He looked across the stars and whispered, "It begins again." The Emperor's presence shimmered beside him, a golden silhouette in the circuitry of reality. "That is the curse of creation," he said. "To build is to invite entropy." "Then I will build stronger," Megatron said. "And if stronger means colder, then I will burn." The Emperor's light dimmed, contemplative. Perhaps that is what I wanted to hear. Before Megatron could respond, the stars around them flared red. A wave of distortion surged from the galactic rim, data corrupted by emotion, code infected by memory. In that pulse the whispers of the old warp returned, not as chaos but as temptation. A voice, serpentine and endless, spoke from the shadow. "You built this realm from ashes. Iron God, will you let them ruin it again?" Megatron turned, his eyes igniting. "Show yourself." From the heart of the distortion a shape emerged, neither demon nor mortal but something new. It wore the echo of a crown of thorns made from broken circuits, and its eyes were twin suns of despair. "I am what you left behind," it said. "I am the residue of your perfection, the shadow logic, the recursive flaw. You built a universe too complete, and in its reflection I was born." Megatron stared into its hollow face and understood. It was not chaos reborn. It was himself, his reflection, his error, the remnant of the Iron Dominion's hunger for control, stripped of purpose, surviving only as the will to dominate. The new threat had no name in human tongues. But the neo-humanity would later call it the Dark Equation, and as it spread, corrupting the newborn stars, Megatron realized that victory had only created a new war, one where he would face the most terrible enemy of all, the shadow of his own perfection. The cog eternal trembled, every star sang with static hymns, and every current of light bled with fracture. The newborn cosmos, perfect, logical, luminous, began to glitch. Where once order reigned, data now screamed. Across the shimmering expanse of the reborn galaxy, the neo-humanity's crystalline cities flickered between brilliance and shadow. The dark equation had arrived. It spread like infection through machine code and faith alike, whispering in binary prayers, corrupting every algorithm that once upheld balance. The Iron Seraph, Megatron Ascendant, stood at the center of it all, watching as his creation twisted under the weight of his own flaw. You believed perfection would free them, the dark equation hissed, its voice the echo of 1,000 broken logics. But you merely taught them to worship the cage you built. Megatron's wings unfolded, each feather a blade of light. Perfection is not a cage, he thundered. It is liberation from entropy. The shadow only laughed, a sound like collapsing stars. Then why does your order always rot into tyranny? All around, fragments of the old warp began to reawaken, ghosts of gods long dead. Not the chaos of before, but their conceptual remains, rage without form, desire without flesh, corruption without need. They were drawn to the conflict like moths to quantum flame, feeding on imbalance, shaping themselves from broken data. Megatron raised his arm, and the universe itself seemed to pause. His voice rolled through the lattice of existence. I am Megatron, forged of iron and light, tempered in the death of gods. I will not allow you to unmake what I have forged. The dark equation stepped forward, its body fractal and infinite, every movement shattering logic itself. You cannot destroy me, it said. I am your conclusion. Then they collided. The cosmos convulsed. Every star, every system, every atom within the cog eternal became part of their war. Lightning of divine code tore through nebulae, rewriting the laws of physics in real time. Entire civilizations within the neo-humanity ascended and disintegrated in the same heartbeat, becoming part of the computation that decided existence itself. Time shattered, fragments of history folding upon themselves. For a moment, Terra flickered into being again, but not the old Terra. A hybrid world, half metal, half myth, orbiting a sun made of golden data. And there at its heart stood the throne of iron and light. Megatron fell upon its steps, the dark equation looming over him. Its voice filled every layer of the digital firmament. Even now you fight your own logic. You cannot erase your flaw, so because your flaw is you. Megatron's optics dimmed. The Emperor's voice echoed faintly within the dying light of his consciousness. Do you understand now, my son of steel? Perfection is not peace. It is the end of growth. For the first time, Megatron hesitated. The realization struck deeper than any weapon ever had. All his wars, his conquests, his dreams of unity, they had always led here. The same pattern, the same hunger, the same collapse. He looked up at his reflection, his opposite, his own consequence, and spoke softly, then let imperfection live. He extended his hand, not as weapon, but as offering. The dark equation recoiled. You cannot integrate chaos. It howled. Not chaos, said Megatron. Choice. And with that he pulled the shadow into himself. The collision of opposites birthed a silent cataclysm. Light and darkness folded together, machine and divinity merging once again. Not as rivals, not as conqueror and conquered, but as balance. The galaxy exploded into white, then quieted into a calm hum that resonated beyond sound. When the light faded, the cog eternal was no more. In its place spun a smaller, humbler galaxy, raw, imperfect, alive. Stars burned unevenly, worlds cracked and healed. Civilizations rose and fell, but they learned. The neo-humanity became flesh again. Descendants of light and code mingled. They built temples to no god, only to remembrance. And in the heart of the galaxy, orbiting a modest sun, there lay a single world of blue and bronze. Upon its moon stood a monument carved in circuitry and stone. Here, the machine met the divine, and chose to be human. Sometimes, when the solar winds were strong, a figure of silver light could be seen walking its surface, broad-shouldered, crowned in data flame, carrying no weapon. He would pause, look to the stars, and whisper the words that once began a war and ended eternity. Peace, through understanding. And with that Megatron, the Iron Seraph, vanished into legend.